Your daughter needs shelter, and my bed needs you. Shocking Wild West proposal that saved a family. The winter wind cut through the small Wild West town like a sharp blade, dust mixed with cold air crawling into every crack between old wooden buildings. People hurried along the street with their heads down, coats pulled tight, minds fixed on their own troubles. No one noticed the woman standing near the closed saloon, holding a thin shawl around her shoulders and pulling her young daughter close to her side. Her name was Clara. She had once lived a normal life, or what passed for normal in those days. Her husband had been a simple man, a railway worker who earned just enough to keep food on the table. When he died in a work accident 2 years earlier, everything fell apart. No savings, no protection, no kindness left for a woman alone with a child. The town that once smiled at her now looked through her like she did not exist. That afternoon, the landlord had finally thrown them out. He did not shout or curse. He did not need to. He simply stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and told her time was up. Rent was overdue. Promises did not feed his family. Clara had packed what little they owned into a worn cloth bag, a spare dress, a small blanket, and a wooden toy her daughter refused to leave behind. Now, as the sun dipped lower, Clara felt panic settle deep in her chest. Night was dangerous. Cold nights were worse. She looked down at her daughter, Emily, whose small hands were red from the cold. "Mama," Emily whispered, trying to sound brave. "Are we going somewhere warm?" Clara forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm just finding the right place." But she had already tried everywhere. The boarding house was full. The church had no room left. Neighbors who once shared meals now avoided eye contact. Some whispered behind her back, judging her for being a widow, for being poor, for still surviving. As darkness crept in, Clara remembered a place on the edge of town, a ranch, old and quiet, sitting alone beyond the last dirt road. The man who lived there was known as Caleb Wright. People said he was rough, distant, and cold as the land he worked. Others said he simply wanted to be left alone. Clara had never spoken to him, but she had nothing left to lose. Holding Emily's hand, she walked past the last house, the lights fading behind them. The road grew uneven, the wind stronger. By the time they reached the ranch fence, Emily was shivering badly. Clara knocked on the wooden door with trembling fingers. Once. Twice. No answer. She considered turning back, but the thought of the street at night pushed her forward. She knocked again, harder this time. The door opened slowly. A tall man stood there, his face shadowed by the lantern behind him. His hair was dark, his eyes sharp but tired. He looked from Clara to Emily without speaking. "I'm sorry to bother you," Clara said quickly, her voice shaking. "I know it's late. I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. My daughter, she needs somewhere warm, just for the night." The man remained silent for a moment. Emily pressed closer to her mother. Finally he spoke. "You're the widow from town." "Yes." He stepped aside slightly, letting the cold air rush into the house. "Come in." "Thank you." Truly. Inside, the house was simple but clean. A fire burned low in the hearth. Caleb handed Emily a blanket without a word. She took it shyly, her eyes wide. "She can sit by the fire," he said. Clara lowered herself onto a chair, exhaustion flooding her body now that the danger had eased. For a long moment none of them spoke. The only sound was the crackling fire. Caleb leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You can stay tonight," he said. "But we need to talk." Clara stiffened. "I can work. Clean. Cook. Anything." He shook his head. "It's not about that." His eyes moved to Emily, who had fallen asleep almost instantly, curled by the fire. "She can't go back out there," he continued. "That's clear. I know." He sighed, running a hand over his face, as if weighing something heavy. "This town watches everything. They already talk. A woman and child staying here will raise questions." Clara's heart began to race. If this is about reputation, but the sheriff does, so do land inspectors. They'd been looking for reasons to interfere. A man living alone is suspicious to them. Paused, choosing his words carefully. "I need stability. Someone in this house. Someone the town can see." Clara looked at him, confused and afraid. "What are you saying?" He met her eyes, steady and serious. "You and your daughter need shelter. I need a household. No harm, no force. Just an arrangement." The words hung heavy in the air. Clara's mind raced. She thought of the streets, the cold, the looks people gave her. She thought of Emily waking up tomorrow warm instead of sick or worse. What kind of arrangement? she asked quietly. You stay here, he said. You help with the home as you see fit. I provide safety, food, protection. Nothing more than respect. Studied his face. There was no hunger in his eyes. No cruelty. Just loneliness and caution. And if I say no, she asked, then I'll still make sure the child sleeps here tonight, he replied. But after that, you'll have to find another way. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Pride had already been stripped away long ago. What mattered now was survival. She nodded slowly. For my daughter, I'll stay. Caleb gave a single nod in return. You can use the back room. There's a bed. I'll take the chair. As Clara settled Emily into the small bed later that night, tears slid silently down her cheeks. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if this choice would save them or break them. But for the first time in weeks, her daughter slept peacefully, warm and safe. Outside, the wind howled against the ranch walls. Inside, 3 broken lives rested under one roof, unaware that this night would change everything. Morning arrived slowly at the ranch, not with comfort but with a pale light creeping through the small windows. Clara woke before the sun fully rose. For a moment she did not remember where she was. Then the smell of old wood and ash reached her, and she sat up quickly, her heart beating fast. Emily was still asleep beside her, wrapped tightly in the blanket Caleb had given her. Her face looked peaceful, free from fear for the first time in many days. Clara watched her for a long moment. That alone told her she had made the right choice, at least for now. Clara slipped quietly from the bed and stepped into the main room. Caleb was already awake. He sat at the table, repairing a worn leather strap, his movements slow and careful. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. You slept? He said, not as a question. Yes, Clara replied softly. Thank you. He nodded and returned to his work. Silence filled the room again, but it did not feel heavy. It felt careful, like 2 strangers sharing space without knowing where to stand. I'll make breakfast, Clara said after a moment. If that's all right. There's cornmeal and dried beans, Caleb replied. Use what you need. She moved around the kitchen area, keeping her motions gentle. As she cooked, she noticed how clean the place was, though it lacked warmth. Everything had its place, but nothing showed signs of comfort or joy. No pictures. No extra chairs, no signs of visitors. When Emily woke, she ran into the main room, smiling shyly at Caleb. Good morning, sir, she said politely. He looked surprised, then cleared his throat. Morning. She sat at the table, swinging her legs as Clara placed food in front of her. Emily ate eagerly, and Clara felt relief watching color return to her daughter's cheeks. After breakfast, Caleb stood and grabbed his coat. I'll be out checking the fence, he said. You're welcome to stay inside. I can help. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. But this land can be rough. Do what feels safe. When he left, Clara began cleaning, wiping surfaces, and shaking dust from blankets. She wanted to show respect, to prove she was worth the shelter she'd been given. Emily followed her, humming softly. Later that morning, Clara heard voices outside. Her heart jumped. She peeked through the window and saw 2 townsmen on horseback speaking with Caleb near the fence. She pulled Emily close and stayed quiet. When Caleb returned, his face was tight. Was there trouble? Clara asked. Just questions, he replied. They heard someone stayed the night. I'm sorry. I don't want to cause problems. You didn't, he said firmly. But this is why we need to be clear about what this is. If you're staying, the town will assume things. We don't need details. Just a simple story. What story? That you're helping me keep house, he said. That your husband was family to mine. People accept simple reasons. Clara agreed. She had learned long ago that truth often mattered less than peace. Days passed, and life settled into a careful rhythm. Clara cooked, cleaned, and slowly brought warmth into the house. She hung a cloth by the window. She mended a torn curtain. Small changes, but they mattered. Emily explored the land, always within sight. Caleb kept an eye on her from a distance, pretending not to notice when she followed him to the barn. One afternoon, she handed him a wildflower. For your house, she said. He took it awkwardly and placed it on the table later, unsure why his chest felt tight. At night, Clara lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch. Caleb slept in the main room, keeping his word. She felt safe, but uncertainty stayed with her. She wondered how long this arrangement could last. One evening, Caleb returned late, his coat dusty. Trouble? Clara asked. "Someone tried to cut my fence," he replied. "Could be nothing." "Could be a warning. Do you want us to leave?" He looked at Emily, who sat near the fire drawing in the dirt. "No, that's exactly why I don't." That night, as the fire burned low, Clara spoke carefully. "I want you to know I won't take advantage of your kindness." Caleb met her gaze. "And I won't take advantage of your situation." Trust, fragile and slow, began to grow. But beyond the ranch, the town continued to watch. Rumors spread quietly. Some believed the story, others did not. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes followed the light of the ranch house, waiting for a reason to step closer. Clara did not know it yet, but this fragile peace was only the beginning. The next test would not come from hunger or cold, but from the past she thought she had left behind. The days after the fence was damaged felt heavier, as if the air itself carried worry. Clara noticed it in the way Caleb checked the locks twice at night and how he scanned the land before letting Emily wander outside. He said little, but his silence spoke clearly. Something was coming, and he did not yet know what shape it would take. Clara tried to keep life steady for Emily. She made small routines, waking her early, brushing her hair by the window, and giving her simple chores to make her feel useful. Emily fed the chickens, collected eggs, and followed Clara everywhere with endless questions. The ranch slowly began to feel like a real home, not just a place to hide. One afternoon, while Clara was washing clothes near the water barrel, she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Her heart jumped. She stood up quickly and pulled Emily behind her, but it was only a supply rider passing by, tipping his hat without stopping. Still, Clara's hands shook long after he disappeared down the road. That evening, Caleb returned earlier than usual. He set his tools down and sat heavily on the bench. "You look tired," Clara said. "I went into town," he replied. "Needed feed." She waited, sensing there was more. "People are talking again," he added. "Someone's asking questions about you." Clara felt the old fear return, sharp and familiar. "About what?" "About your husband. About why you left town so suddenly," he said. "I told him the same thing as before." She nodded, but her chest felt tight. She had hoped the past would stay buried. She had worked hard to survive quietly, without drawing attention. Now it seemed impossible. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Clara sat near the fire, staring into the low flames. Caleb noticed and spoke gently. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said. "But if there's something I should know, now would be the time." She had avoided this moment, but she knew it could not be avoided forever. "There was a man," she began softly, "before my husband died. He believed I owed him something I never promised. When my husband passed, that belief grew worse. He followed us for a time," she continued. "Not openly, just enough to remind me he was there. When I couldn't pay rent anymore, I knew staying in town would only make things worse." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I didn't want Emily growing up afraid." Caleb's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Do you think he found you?" But fear has a way of catching up. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled quietly. "You're safe here," Caleb said finally. "As long as you're under my roof, no one touches you." "Why?" she asked. "You don't owe us anything." He stared into the fire. "I know what it's like to lose a family," he said, "and I know what it's like to be watched while standing alone." Some truths did not need details. Days later, the tension grew real. Clara was inside baking bread when Emily came running in, her face pale. "Mama," she whispered, "there's a man by the fence." She moved to the window carefully and saw a figure standing near the outer gate. He was tall, wearing a long coat, his hat pulled low. He did not approach the house. He simply stood there, waiting. Caleb was in the barn. Clara did not panic. She guided Emily into the back room and told her to stay quiet. Then she stepped outside. The man turned toward her, a slow smile crossing his face. "It's been a while," he said. Her voice stayed steady, though her hands trembled. "You shouldn't be here." "I go where I please," he replied calmly. "You left without a word." "This is private land," she said. "You need to leave. Step away from the fence." Caleb stood several steps behind Clara, his posture firm, his eyes sharp. The man looked between them and laughed softly. "So this is where you ran." "She didn't run," Caleb said. "She found shelter. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Caleb replied. "You're trespassing." For a moment it felt like time froze. Then the man raised his hand slightly. No trouble," he said. "Just passing through." He backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact with Clara, then turned and disappeared down the road. Clara's knees felt weak. Caleb stepped closer, not touching her, but standing solidly beside her. "You okay?" he asked. "Sorry?" She nodded, tears finally falling. "Thank you." That night, Emily clung to Clara, frightened by the tension she did not fully understand. "Are we leaving?" she asked. "We're staying right here." Caleb stayed awake long after the house grew quiet, sitting near the door with his coat on, listening to the night. The next morning he made a decision. "I want you both to stay," he told Clara, "not as guests, as part of this place." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the town already believes we're a family," he replied. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending otherwise." She understood what he meant. Not romance, not promises, protection. "If that keeps Emily safe," she said, "then I agree." From that day on, Caleb walked into town with Clara by his side. He introduced her openly. He let people see Emily laugh and play on the ranch, and the message was clear without words. This land was no longer empty. The danger had not disappeared, but something stronger had taken its place. Unity, trust, and a quiet bond forming between three people who had once believed they would always be alone. They did not know what the future held, but for the first time they faced it together. Life at the ranch changed after Caleb began walking into town with Clara and Emily. People noticed. They always did. Some watched with curiosity, others with quiet judgment, but no one openly questioned it. Seeing them together created a picture the town could understand, and that picture brought a thin layer of safety. Clara felt the change most when she entered the general store. Before, conversations had stopped when she walked in. Now, people nodded politely. Some even spoke to Emily, offering small smiles or pieces of candy. It was not kindness exactly, but it was acceptance, and that mattered. Still, peace did not come easily. One afternoon while Clara and Emily were in town, Caleb noticed a stranger standing across the street watching them closely. The man did not move when Caleb looked his way. He simply turned and walked off slowly. Caleb felt a tight knot form in his chest. He knew that look. It was not curiosity. It was interest with intention. That night, Caleb checked the locks again and made sure the lanterns stayed lit. Clara noticed but did not comment. She had learned that fear did not disappear by naming it. Instead, she focused on building something steady inside the house. She began teaching Emily to read using old papers and worn books Caleb kept in a trunk. Each evening, Emily sat at the table, sounding out words proudly. Caleb often pretended to be busy, but he listened from across the room, feeling something warm grow inside him as he heard Emily laugh at her own mistakes. Clara also brought life back into the ranch in small ways. She planted herbs near the back wall. She fixed loose boards. She cooked meals that smelled of care instead of survival. The house slowly stopped feeling empty, but trouble does not always announce itself loudly. It arrived one evening with raised voices near the gate. Clara was inside sewing when she heard shouting. Emily froze. Clara moved quickly, pulling her away from the window. Caleb stepped outside. Two men stood near the fence, one of them the same stranger Caleb had seen in town. The other was a local man known for stirring trouble. Their words were sharp, filled with false concern and hidden threats. "This land's been quiet for years," the local man said. "Now there's company. Folks are wondering." Caleb stood firm. "Nothing to wonder about." The stranger smiled thinly. "You're done here." The men exchanged looks. The stranger leaned closer to the fence. "Be careful," he said calmly. "Stories grow when people hide things. Then listen closely. There's nothing hidden here, and you're not welcome back." The men left, but their words stayed behind like smoke. That night, Clara could not sleep. She sat by the fire long after Emily drifted off. "This is my fault," she said quietly. Caleb shook his head. "No, this is what happens when weak people look for control." Eyes filled with worry. "What if they try again?" "Then they'll find this place isn't easy to break," he said. Days later, the town sheriff arrived. He dismounted calmly, tipping his hat. "Evening?" Caleb stepped forward. "What brings you out here?" His eyes moved to Clara, then to Emily. "People talk. You know how it is." "You running a decent place here?" the sheriff asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes." The sheriff studied them for a long moment. Then he nodded. "That's all I needed to hear." After he left, Clara felt her knees weaken. "That could have gone badly," she whispered. "But it didn't," Caleb replied, "because we didn't hide." She had spent so long shrinking, trying to disappear. Now standing openly beside someone else made her stronger. Emily sensed the shift too. She became bolder, asking questions, exploring farther. One afternoon she fell and scraped her knee. Caleb lifted her gently, carrying her inside while Clara cleaned the wound. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck. "Thank you," she said. "Anytime." That simple moment changed something deep inside him. Later that night, Clara spoke the truth she had been holding back. "You've given us more than shelter," she said. "You gave us a place to belong." He looked at her surprised. "I didn't plan that." "I know," she replied. "But it happened anyway." Silence stretched between them. "Not uncomfortable, just honest." "I don't want this to end," she added quietly. Caleb met her gaze. "Neither do I." From then on, they stopped thinking of their arrangement as temporary. Not in words, but in actions. Caleb repaired the spare room properly. Clara stitched new curtains. Emily planted flowers near the porch. But danger, patient and bitter, had not given up. One night, smoke rose near the far edge of the land. Caleb saw it first and rode out quickly. Someone had set fire to dry grass, testing how fast help would come. Caleb put it out before it spread, but the message was clear. The next morning, Caleb addressed Clara seriously. "They want fear," he said. "We won't give it to them." "What do we do?" she asked. "We stand visible," he replied. "Together." That same day, Caleb invited neighbors to the ranch for a simple meal. It was a bold move. Clara worried, but she agreed. People arrived cautiously. Some stayed near their horses. Others stepped inside, surprised by the warmth. They saw Emily laughing, Clara working confidently, and Caleb moving easily among them. Rumors lost power when replaced by truth. By evening, the land felt safer. As the sun set, Clara stood beside Caleb on the porch. "I never thought standing still could be braver than running," she said. Caleb nodded. "Running keeps you alive. Standing builds a life." But they knew something important had changed. They were no longer surviving. They were protecting something worth keeping. The morning after the gathering at the ranch felt different. The land seemed calmer, as if it had finally accepted the people living on it. Clara noticed it when she stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air. The fear that once followed her like a shadow was still there, but it no longer controlled her steps. Emily ran ahead, laughing as she chased a butterfly near the porch. Caleb watched her from a distance, leaning against the fence. He did not smile often, but when he did, it came quietly and stayed longer than before. Life moved forward, not suddenly, but steadily. Word spread through town that the ranch was no longer a place of secrets. Neighbors spoke openly about Caleb's hospitality and Clara's strength. The same people who once whispered now nodded with respect. Rumors faded when faced with truth and time. Still, one loose thread remained. The man who had followed Clara in the past had not been seen since the night of the grass fire. That worried Caleb more than open trouble. Silence often meant waiting. One afternoon, while Clara and Emily were inside preparing food, a rider approached the ranch. Caleb stepped forward to meet him. "I'm looking for a woman," the rider said cautiously. "Name's Clara." Caleb's body tensed, but his voice stayed calm. "That depends who's asking." "I'm not here to cause trouble. I was sent by the sheriff." Caleb studied him, then called Clara outside. The rider explained that the man who had caused trouble before had been arrested in another town for repeated harassment. He would not be returning. The sheriff wanted Clara to know she was safe. Clara felt her knees weaken with relief. She thanked the rider quietly as he left. That night she cried, not from fear, but from release. The past no longer had power over her future. Caleb stood nearby, unsure what to say. "You're free," he finally said. She looked at him through tears. "We already were, because of you." From that moment on, their lives stopped being shaped by escape and began being shaped by choice. Weeks passed. Spring arrived slowly, softening the land. Flowers Emily planted began to bloom. Clara opened the windows wide, letting sunlight fill the rooms that once felt dark and empty. Caleb made changes too. He fixed the old barn roof properly. He added a second chair by the fire. Small things that said he was no longer living, as if he expected to be alone forever. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emily spoke up. "This is our home," she said simply. Clara smiled. Caleb felt something settle deep in his chest. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." Later that night, Caleb spoke carefully, choosing his words as if they mattered more than usual. "I never planned for this," he said. "I never thought I'd share my life again. But I don't want this to end," he continued. "Not because of the town, not because of safety, because this feels right." Clara's heart beat faster. She had wondered if this moment would come, but she had never rushed it. "I feel the same," she said, "but only if it's real. No fear. No pretending." Caleb nodded. Real. They did not rush forward. They simply allowed the truth to exist between them. Over time, the town began to see them not as a strange arrangement, but as a family formed by choice and care. Emily grew stronger, brighter, and more confident. She no longer asked where they would sleep next. She planned for tomorrow. One day during a small-town gathering, Caleb stood beside Clara openly and introduced her as his partner. There were no shocked faces. Only quiet acceptance. Later, when they returned home, Clara stood on the porch and looked across the land that had once felt like a last refuge. "I came here afraid," she said softly. "I thought this place was just shelter." Caleb stood beside her. "And now? Now it's where I found myself again," she replied. He nodded. "Same here. The ranch no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning." Years later, people would talk about the quiet ranch on the edge of town. They would say it was where a broken family found safety and where a lonely man found purpose again. They would talk about strength, not scandal. But Clara, Caleb, and Emily knew the truth. It was not one shocking moment that saved them. It was patience, respect, courage, and the choice to stand together when running would have been easier.